What's up guys, welcome to my Balance Druid guide for patch 7.2. Now in this guide I'm going to go over your spells and abilities, your talents, your artifact traits and relics, your stat priority, and then your rotation for both single target and AoE, as well as a demonstration of that, and then just some macros and add-ons that I use that you might find useful. Now for easy browsing I have included some timestamps in the description below, so if you want to just skip to a specific section, feel free to use those to navigate the video a bit quicker. Now I want to start by talking about your spells and abilities, and we'll begin by talking about your Astral Power secondary resource system. Pretty simple, some spells you cast will generate Astral Power for you, and others will spend it. You can have a maximum of 100 Astral Power at any given time, and any more you try to generate after that will be wasted. Now the first spell I'm going to go over is Solar Wrath. Pretty simple spell. It's a single target cast, like something like this. You shoot it off, and it gives you some Astral Power. Next up is Lunar Strike. Similarly, it's got a longer cast time, but it will hit the target and cleave things around it if they're within the range of 5 yards, and generates a little bit more Astral Power than Solar Wrath. Looks like that. Next up we've got our Artifact ability, which we gain once we get our Scythe of Elune at level 100 and do the quests. And this is a 3 charge system spell, and it has 3 different phases. So New Moon is a very quick cast, and it generates 10 Astral Power, something like that. Half Moon is the next one, and it's a bit longer of a cast, does more damage, and generates 20 Astral Power, and it looks like this. And then Full Moon generates 40 Astral Power and is a much longer cast time, does a lot of damage. And New Moon will hit stuff in AoE, but it doesn't do more damage, it just splits the damage among the enemies it hits. It looks a bit like this. Now we also do have 2 damage over time spells, Moonfire and Sunfire. Moonfire is pretty standard, you just cast it and it hits the target, and then does damage over time as well as a little bit of damage up front. And then Sunfire is pretty similar. It does a dot like so, but it will also hit things or apply the dot to enemies within the range of its splash. Now it doesn't do direct damage to those enemies, but it will apply the dot, which then does some damage for you. As far as spending Astral Power, we've got 2 options. There's Star Surge, which costs 40 Astral Power and single target ability, and it looks like this. And you just do a bunch of damage to the target. Now when you use Star Surge, you'll notice I get 2 buffs called Solar Empowerment and Lunar Empowerment. And these just make the damage of your next Solar Wrath or Lunar Strike, depending on which one it is, increase. So it just makes you do more with those spells. And then for AoE, we do have Starfall. Now this costs 60 Astral Power by default, and you can put it in an area like so, and in that area it just does AoE damage. Now this also does apply a debuff called Stellar Empowerment, which makes them take more damage from your damage over time spells, your Moonfire and your Sunfire. And as far as DPS cooldowns go, we just have one, called Celestial Alignment. It's a very simple cooldown, 3-minute cooldown, and it increases the damage you do by 30%, and increases the Astral Power generated by Solar Wrath and Lunar Strike specifically by 50%. And as far as defensive cooldowns go, we have just one. It's called Barkskin. It's a 1-minute cooldown, and basically makes you take 20% less damage, and there's no more pushback on your spells if you're casting and you take damage while it's up, and you can use it in a variety of crowd control situations. You also do have Bear Form, which technically isn't really a defensive cooldown, it just doesn't have a cooldown, but if you do go into Bear Form, you'll notice that your max health goes up quite significantly, which can help you survive mechanics. Of course, you will lose DPS by being in there, and it does unlock different abilities you can use, but I won't go into those too much in this video. As far as utility goes, we do have Solar Beam as an interrupt. It's a 1-minute cooldown. They will both interrupt a cast if you use it while something is casting, and it will leave an area on the ground that silences enemies that are in it. So it looks something like this, and just stays there for 8 seconds, and anything that moves into it is silenced. We also have Entangling Roots, which you cast, and just root the target in place. Pretty simple, no cooldown. We also do have Regrowth, which is a casted heal, and it heals a bunch up front, and then a little bit over time. And then we also have Innervate. Now Innervate is a 3-minute cooldown that can be used on a healer, and basically it gives them free casts for 10 seconds. So all of their spells are free of mana cost, and so they can spam whatever they want in that duration. Very useful for raids or in high damage situations and say like a Mythic Plus perhaps. Now we also do have a Dispel called Remove Corruption, and it dispels curse and poison effects from the friendly target. And then we do have a couple of other abilities in other forms, which I'm not really going to go over too much. One that is notable is Dash, which will make you run really fast. It does force you into cat form, so if you use it outside of cat form like so, then it will actually force you into cat form, and you have to be in cat form to get the bonus movement speed. It's a 3-minute cooldown with a very, very fast movement speed ability. Now I also do have a taunt called Growl, and Growl does require you to be in bear form, so if you try to use it outside of bear form, it'll tell you have to be in bear form, but you can make a marker if you want to force yourself into bear form and then taunt the target. And finally, there's one passive you do have, and I forget where it's listed now because it's been moved around, but it was called Owlkin Frenzy. And basically when you take damage, there's a chance that you proc free, or not free, but instant Lunar Strike. Now I'm going to go ahead and go over your talents. Now, at level 15, generally Star Lord for single target, especially when you're using Star Surge, is really, really strong. And then if you want to sacrifice some single target for AoE, then Warrior of Elune is your only option in this tier. That actually scales with AoE, so you would take this for AoE, but you will lose single target for it. Now do note that Star Lord doesn't do anything if you don't Star Surge at all, so consider that. And if you don't want to use Warrior of Elune, if you want to still have some good single target, then you can take Force of Nature. It will spread out the damage a little bit, but it'll still do decently single target as well. And this also has the added benefit of taunting non-raid bosses, which can be good in like dungeons, for example. You might find some niche situations for this. But for the most part, single target or anytime you're using Star Surge quite a bit, Star-Lord is good, and then Warrior of Elune for pure super heavy AoE. Level 30, you can pick whatever you want really. Renewal is a more defensive cooldown, it does heal you for instantly for a large amount. And then you can pick between Wild Charge or Displace the Beast for movement, kind of up to you, what you like, what you prefer. Level 45, we're mostly looking at passives here. I generally recommend Restoration Affinity. It does give you a passive heal, which can heal you or other people as well, if you're already full. And it does give you a couple healing spells. The main one that you might find yourself using is Swift Mend. 30-second cooldown heals you for a lot. But if you don't want to bother with that, or you're worried about one-shot mechanics, then you can take Guardian Affinity instead, which will reduce the damage you take passively. Feral Affinity I don't really recommend, not really that useful. You already have a movement tier that you can use if you're worried about that. So I don't generally recommend this, but it is totally up to you what you like in this tier. Level 60 is all CC, so kind of mess around with whatever you like here. We've got a single target stun, AoE roots, and a knockback that has a daze attached to it. Now at level 75, generally going to want Incarnation for most situations, and it's a 3-minute cooldown. It replaces your Celestial Alignment with a better version. It buffs your damage by 35% instead of 30%, and it lasts twice as long. So it's a very, very potent cooldown and makes you do a lot more damage in most situations. If you're looking for big AoE, constant and just strong AoE, then Soul of the Forest is a better choice in that situation. I don't really recommend Stellar Flare currently. At level 90, Blessing of the Ancients is best for single target, especially when you can sit there and cast a lot. And in those cases, you'll be using the Blessing of Elune version of it rather than the Blessing of Anshu. And it just generates more astral power for you. If you have to move a lot, like you can't cast a lot of those spells, or there's a lot of targets you want more extended multi-target, then you can use Shooting Stars. Anytime you have lots of your Moonfires and Sunfires active on multiple targets, this becomes better than Blessing of the Ancients. Level 100, Nature's Balance for single target. Similarly to Blessing of the Ancients, it requires you to stand still and cast lots of Lunar Strikes and Solar Wraths, and just kind of helps keep your dots so up on the target so you don't have to refresh them as often. Now, if you're looking at AoE though, then Stellar Drift is really, really strong and buffs your Starfall. So if you're using lots of Starfall for AoE or for any other reason, then this is really, really potent. Now, one note I want to make about your talents, especially in Nighthold or just in raids in general, is that you can mix and match. So you don't have to go like a pure single target build like this, for example, Star-Lord, Incarnation, Blessing, and Nature's Balance. Maybe there's some little bit of AoE you have on a fight, and you say, okay, you know what, that's pretty relevant too. I'm going to go ahead and pick Stellar Drift, but keep the other stuff. Yes, you're still focused mainly on single target, but when it comes to it, when you need to AoE, it's a lot bigger or something like that. So you can kind of mix and match. Don't be afraid to play around with it or look at Warcraft logs to see what other people are doing on specific fights. Now I want to go over your artifact weapon, your pathing choices and relics, and there is some freedom here, so you can change the pathing you want, although I will go ahead and recommend that you do follow this pathing unless you have very specific needs or wants in what you want to do in terms of content. Now, start here at New Moon, and I recommend going up and around to Power of Gauldrin here as your first golden trait. And it just makes your Star Surge proc extra damage every so often. Then go Dark Side of the Moon, grab your 2 Twilight Glow and Sunfun Burns traits, and then go to Moon and Stars, which buffs your Incarnation or Celestial Alignment, and gives you haste every time you cast a damaging spell while those spells are active, those cooldowns are active. After that, I recommend Scythe of the Stars, and then Sunblind, and then go to Rapid Innovation and grab Solar Stabbing, and then grab your last golden trait here, Echoing Stars. And this just makes Starfall do a bit more AoE damage, splashes a bit. After that, you can finish up with Empowerment, and then finally Bladed Feathers. Now once you've gotten all your points in, you'll have 34 points, and 35th point goes into Gauldrin's Fury, because you don't really have a choice there. After that, you can unlock your new traits through your questline on Broken Shore, and also get extra points in the old traits. Now, I recommend going for the new ones first at this point, so grab Radiance for sure, and then grab extra Starfall damage, Wax and Wane, and Circadian Invocation, which basically, if you do your rotation correctly, will give you 6% extra damage. It's really, really good. After that, it's kind of up to you what you want to focus on. If you want to go single target first, then you're going to be focusing on grabbing Scythe of the Stars, and then a Solar Stabbing, and then Dark Side of the Moon, and then Empowerment, and then your 2 dots. So whichever order. Probably for single, if you really want to focus, like maximize it, you could go Moonfire first, but kind of up to you there. And then you can grab the rest of the stuff after, like Falling Star. Now, if you want to focus on AoE, then Falling Star is going to be your best, as long as you're using Starfall to get the benefit of your Stellar Empowerment. And then you'll be grabbing your 2 dots, definitely Sunfire first, because that does apply more easily to AoE, and then Moonfire. And then after that, probably Dark Side of the Moon, and then the other stuff, in whatever order. So again, probably Scythe, Solar Stabbing, and then Empowerment, because they're just focused on single target mostly there. But kind of up to you how you want to do that. And then you'd fill in whatever other points in these 2, Touch of the Moon and Bladed Feathers, because they're kind of useless in terms of DPS. So up to you, single target or AoE first. And the same will apply to your relic choices. So none of the relics are amazing. None of these traits are like mind-bogglingly amazing. So in general, you're going to want the highest eye level. Now, some are better than others. For single target, Scythe is your best one. And then after that, Solar Stabbing is pretty good. And Dark Side of the Moon is okay for single target. And then Empowerment is decent, but lower than all of that. And then the 2 dots are just below Empowerment. For AoE, again, Falling Star is really, really good, so you get any traits in that. It's very strong as long as you're using Starfall, which you probably are for AoE. And then the 2 dots are really strong as well. Again, Sunfire probably being slightly easier to use or get the most out of, because you only have to press it once, and it applies to everything in the area. But Moonfire also very strong for that as well. And then Dark Side of the Moon would probably be kind of a very minor buff to your AoE at that point. Now, as far as relics go, it's kind of the same story as picking your last points or your new points. If you want to focus on single target, then you can grab Scythe of the Stars, it's your best. Solar Stabbing, really good after that. And then Dark Side of the Moon, a little, not quite as good as Solar Stabbing, but pretty decent. And then Empowerment would be next after that, and then the 2 dots would be about the same after that, but kind of the lowest choices for single target. If you want to focus on AoE, Falling Star is really good as long as you're using Starfall all the time. And then the 2 dots are probably your best. Sunfire Burns being slightly better because, of course, it's easier to apply Sunfire to multiple targets. But Moonfire also very potent there. And then Dark Side of the Moon is probably a very small buff to your AoE. Everything else, of course, being pure single target, pretty much. Now, do note that none of these traits are so amazing that you can kind of forego eye level. Eye level is pretty much king. So if you get an upgrade in eye level for your relic, go ahead and go with that. It's just these are more for if you have the same eye level and you're trying to pick between different traits. Next, I want to talk about your stat priority. And the first thing I'm going to say, of course, which I always say is, for DPS, if you can simulate yourself, that's the best way to do it. So you get specific personalized stat weights for yourself. Because it does change a lot and they do play off each other a bit, these stats. So, but if you just want kind of a generic or general stat priority to go for, then generally you want Haste as your top stat, and then Mastery. Now, Crit and Verse are both really low, and then it would be Crit and then Verse. But generally try to avoid too much of these. You can have like a couple thousand, but like not too much. So mostly haste and mastery, they're both very strong and very potent. Now, as a small note, if you do have the Emerald Dreamcatcher legendary helmets, then there are these haste breakpoints in which you can fit different spells in between your cast of Star Surge. And I won't get too much into that. Just know that if you do have that, there are breakpoints technically, but it also depends a bit on your latency, because that affects, you know, how fast you can cast different things, how fast you can chain stuff. So do know that there are breakpoints, but for the most part, if you don't have that, or if you're not using it on a specific fight, then just go haste and then mastery, and then try to avoid crit and verse. But if you have to, then crit and then verse. Now I want to talk about your DPS rotation, and I'm going to go over your single target first. Now there's a few concepts that you need to know. And if you follow these concepts, even if you kind of adjust the rotation to your preference or the situation, like movement and things like that, then you'll do fine. It's not a very strict rotation in that you have to do things in a very specific order, as long as you follow some guidelines. And the first guideline is to keep your dots up. So Moonfire and Sunfire need to be active pretty much all the time. It's very important, especially with the tier 19 4 piece, which buffs your Star Surge damage when they have both dots. So just very simple, very important to have. And the next concept is to never overcap your astral power. Try not to sit at 100 astral power, and certainly don't generate more astral power when you're at 100, because you're wasting a lot of potential damage. After that, try not to let your moon spells sit at 3 stacks, so don't overcap your moon stacks, because you're wasting good damage and good astral power generation. And finally, the empowerment buffs you get from using Star Surge, try not to overcap those, and those do cap out at 3, so 3 stacks of each. Now, if you have to choose between one of them because of your legendaries or just random procs and things like that, then I would first go overcap your empowerment stacks. Those are the least important out of all of those. Never overcap your astral power, and try not to overcap your moon spells. It's pretty important to not do that. So of those, empowerments are the least important, but do try to not overcap those if you can help it. Now, as far as generating astral power goes, your highest priority is going to be your moon spells. All of them have really high cast time to astral power generation, and they also do a lot of damage per cast time as well. So it's very important that you do use these as much as possible. After that, if you have empowerment stacks, you want to use Solar Wrath first with empowerment stacks, and then Lunar Strike with empowerment stacks, and then if nothing is available, then you can use Solar Wrath unempowered to help generate astral power if you can't Star Surge, or you can't New Moon, or you just want to build and save some astral power. Now, if you need to prep for like a priority ad that needs to die or something, you can hold off on your moon spells a little bit. It's kind of on a case-by-case basis. You can hold on to like half moon and full moon and stuff like that, and you can also maybe pull up some astral power. But in general, you can spend, if you're not looking to hit that like burst down on a specific ad, then you can go ahead and use Star Surge whenever you're ready to. Now I want to go ahead and show you here the single target rotation so you can see how it looks, and you'll be able to follow along. On the left side here there will be spells that show what I've just cast, so you can kind of follow along with it. And so for the opener, you will precast Solar Wrath, of course pre-pot if you want to. Precast Solar Wrath about 1.5 to 2 seconds before the pull, then New Moon, and then as soon as the timer hits, then you can put your dots on, pop your cooldown, use your other moon spells, and then, Star Surge away, and so on. If you're not on New Moon, I won't really recommend casting it right after Solar Wrath. Just mix it in with the cooldown rotation. But hopefully, in most cases, you will start with New Moon. So I'll precast Solar Wrath into New Moon, and then put my Moonfire and Sunfire on, pop my cooldown, and then do my moon spells. Now here I have enough to use Star Surge, and I decided to use it twice maybe. I'll use my empowerment stack, so Solar Wrath, Lunar Strike, and then Star Surge a couple times. Solar Wrath, Lunar Strike, Solar Wrath, Lunar Strike, because they're both empowered. And then moon spells here too, so I'll use that. Then I'll go ahead and Star Surge, and then I get empowered spells again, so I'll use Solar Wrath, Lunar Strike. Now you notice I like to rotate them, that's just me, it's my preference. You don't have to though, not necessarily have to. So say you have a couple stacks, maybe you want to Solar Wrath a couple times, and then do the Lunar Strike, that's fine. That's totally fine. Kind of up to you, maybe you want to do it based on like movement that's going to happen. You can mess around with that as well. Or maybe here I have to move, okay, I'll refresh my dot. I haven't gotten around to this Lunar Empowerment yet, I'll use my Moon. Star Surge, I'll, Solar Wrath, and then, okay, now I got a little time, maybe I'll hit some Lunar Strikes that are empowered. and so on. And you kind of just get into a rotation like that. But again, you do have some flexibility depending on what's going on. Now, eventually, you may find that you don't have enough astral power to use empowerments all the time. So in this case, I'll just use Solar Wrath unempowered. And then just keep going with that. That's basically the idea of the rotation. So it's pretty simple. Try not to cap your astral power, your empowerments, or your moon spells. Unless you're specifically like pulling up for a phase of the fight. And always keep your dots active. As far as AoE goes, you got some similar concepts, and I've gone ahead and switched talents to a full AoE build. Well, of course, you don't necessarily have to use all of this, but in general, AoE, a little similar to single target, you want to keep your dots rolling. And that is both Sunfire and Moonfire as much as possible. So Sunfire is easy, you just press it once, it applies to everything. Moonfire, you need to go through and, tab or click or whatever, target different things and Moonfire them individually. Now, you need to Moonfire things up to about 5 targets or so, as long as they're going to live long enough to make it worth it. So if your Moonfire dot, if the guy's going to die like really, really soon, like in a few seconds, don't bother Moonfiring. But make sure you keep both dots up as much as possible. And then basically you build up Astral Power and spend it on Starfall instead of Star Surge. So same kind of concept there, except you're just switching what spell you use it on, your Astral Power on. Now as far as building, you still want to use your moon spells because it generates so much astral power for you per cast time, which lets you starfall more, which thus translates to more damage and so on. Now between Solar Wrath and Lunar Strike, you generally won't have empowerments because you're not star surging, but at 2 targets, it's still worth it to starfall, but you're going to be using Solar Wrath at 2 targets as your filler if moon spells are on cooldown. But once you hit 3 targets, then you want to use Lunar Strike as your kind of filler. And then again, Starfall to spend. Now go ahead and demonstrate the AoE rotation, and I will start with a similar opener to single target. You can precast Solar Wrath, and pre-pop precast, use a moon spell, but then get your dots up on everything. And basically it's a lot of dotting for AoE, more than a lot of casts, and then you can use your moon spells to generate, and then Lunar Strike, and so on. So I will be hitting all 5. It's not ideal because they're not all clumped up, so Sunfire I'll have to use twice, but it'll give you a concept, and you can follow along with the icons down here that'll appear to show you what I've just cast. I'll go ahead and start. So precast Solar Wrath, Moon, and then I'm going to start dotting things. And I want to dot, there's an anchor tree chasing this guy here, but you just want to dot as many things as you can. Get Starfall rolling as soon as you get Sunfire probably out, just so you can get some more damage in. But, you do want to keep both Moonfire and Sunfire up as much as possible. So I'll refresh my dots, use this to kind of get more astral power. I notice my Sunfire's fallen off here. My Moonfires are about to, so I kind of get these up. And then, you just keep going like this. Now, I could be using here Warrior Verloon for some extra astral power instantly, but mostly you're kind of maintaining your dots as much as possible. So here I notice Moonfire is coming off, kind of refresh that, and actually I didn't even use my cooldown, but again, it doesn't change much here. We can pop it now, it's the same thing, it just does more damage. Sunfire's coming off, use that. Moon spells generate astral power if you don't need to refresh dots. And you just kind of see, it's a very simple rotation, just kind of maintaining dots. And when you have the chance, make sure you use Lunar Strike or Solar Wrath, depending on how many targets there are, to generate astral power and of course your moon spells. So that's basically the AoE rotation, pretty simple there. You just kind of follow these guidelines and keep dots up as much as possible. Now again, if something's about to die fast, you don't need to put on Moonfire because they're not going to last long enough to make it worth it. But if they're going to live for an extended period, then it's definitely worth it. Here's some add-ons that I use. I don't use too many macros, but I do have Innervate Macro for when I am specifically assigned to somebody and it just immediately casts the Innervate at them without having to target them. So it can be useful for that. And I do have this non-bear taunt macro. If you're not on global cooldown, this will immediately taunt and put you in bear form. But again, I don't really use it too often. So those are kind of the only 2 I really do use. Now, as far as add-ons go, I do use weak auras too, which you probably saw during the demonstration as well as just kind of throughout. Now, there's a bunch of crap here for Mage Tower Challenge and things like that. But I use it to track things like empowerment stacks, the cooldown left on my Celestial Alignment before I can use it again, cooldown and stack timers and such trackers for full moon, dot timers and duration, all that good stuff. You have like Emerald Dreamcatcher duration, trinkets. You can do all sorts of things with it. I try to use it pretty simply, but it is very, very powerful. A very powerful tool. My bars are from Bartender 4. You can kind of customize where they are on the screen. You can customize the key bindings in them, so whatever you like. You can even customize like what kind of boxes they are, if you will, you know, how many buttons you want, how many rows, and so on. So you can mess around with that a lot. My damage meter is details. I finally made the switch from Skada and Recon, but those are perfectly fine as well. And then I do use a couple of other add-ons. The one that flashes the thing in the middle of the screen when it's off cooldown, or supposedly off cooldown, it's called Doom Cooldown Pulse. I don't really recommend it. It's been kind of inaccurate lately. Not to mention, it's something you can do in weak ores too that will be accurate. I also use Exorcist raid tools for things like tracking raid cooldowns, which you didn't really see in this video, but in other videos you may see it. You can organize, you know, the priority, the order, all that stuff. Battle res timers, raid inspects, raid checks for like food flask runes and so on. Good stuff like that. I also do use an add-on called ORA3. And similarly, this one has some of the same things. Battle res monitor, which I like better. Food check, you know, consumable check. You can have a cooldown check as well, like cooldown trackers. Loot methods, you can auto set, and then alerts, which is pretty cool. You get combat alerts in your chat box. Tells you like who taunted, misdirects, so on and so forth. So it can be pretty useful for that. That's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, feel free to hit it with a like. If you want to know when I post a new content like this, or just when I post new videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask in the comments section below, or you can catch me on my stream at twitch.tv. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. Cheers.